All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to PEN Norway and the Ossietzkyprisen Prize Award for 2023. It is, even though this is my first Ossietzky Prize Award, I'm the new General Secretary of Norwegian PEN. I see both familiar and not so familiar faces among you, so it's great to see you all. Before we get started with the program, since some of you know this organization by heart and all the details, others might not. So let me just start with a few words of PEN. We are an independent non-profit membership organization. So if there's any potential members out there, please feel free to check out our webpage and apply to become a member. We defend freedom of expression and support writers at risk. Our goal is that everyone should have the right to express themselves freely. We are the Norwegian branch of PEN International, the world's largest writer and freedom of expression organization, established in 1921. So over 100 years ago, PEN was established as an international literary club, which also fought for writers' right to freedom of expression. And from then on, we have developed into more of an activist organization. Our task is to guard, act, and react to where freedom of expression is put under direct or indirect pressure. It is no coincidence that we are here today on this very date, the 15th of November. Since November 15th, 1981, the day of the imprisoned writer has been an opportunity for the international PEN network of over 100 centers around the world to draw particular attention to writers at risk and threats to freedom of expression globally. PEN centers, members, supporters worldwide are gathered as we are here today to advocate for these writers with activities ranging from letters to governments, social media storms, demonstrations, press conferences, and panel discussions, as we also will have today. Acclaimed writers will send solidarity letters to their colleagues in prisons, wherever they are. The stories my colleague Dag Larsen will introduce to you later on are typical of the type of threats and attacks writers and journalists around the world are often subjected to for peacefully exercising their right of freedom of expression. So the 15th of November is, as you understand, an important day for us in PEN. And for PEN Norway, this day is even more special. It is the day when we annually celebrate the Ossietzky Prize. PEN Norway has upheld this tradition for 30 years, honoring courageous journalists, musicians, and writers. The award, launched in 1994, was named after Carl von Ossietzky, a German journalist and Nobel laureate who exposed Hitler's secret rearmament of Germany. For this, the whistleblower Ossietzky was convicted of treason and later placed in a concentration camp. He died in 1938. Julian Assange is the 30th laureate since the award was established. And this year is therefore special. It really binds together our history, our identity, and our mandate. As the 1935 Nobel Peace Prize to Carl von Ossietzky, this year's Ossietzky Prize to Julian Assange is also a recognition of critical journalism and commitment to exposing the abuse of power and war crimes. We will hear more about the prize, the work of Julian Assange, both from my esteemed colleagues and not least from Stella Assange. It is a great pleasure and honor to have you with us today. But before we start the program, I would like to introduce you to a dear friend of PEN Norway. Sudanese musician Abbasar Hamid was a central and important voice in the year-long struggle against the regime of dictator Omar al-Bashir. Abbasar has his musical roots in African and Sudanese tradition, but is also inspired by reggae, blues, and Western popular music. Because of his political songs and active peace work, Abbasar was subjected to extensive censorship and received numerous of serious threats on his life. In 2008, he and his family fled the country and had exile in Egypt. After several years there, he was invited to become the first musician to settle in Harstad, Norway. Here he continues his work for peace and freedom of speech. Abbasar Hamid, who today is also performed under the name Tore Brun, still lives in Harstad with his family. But tonight he is here with us. So give a warm welcome to Abbasar.
Thank you for the nice intro. Yeah. And it's my honor to open this ceremony. They found him in jail and kept him there, hoping soon he'd die. That's his body and his spirit with a waste to be. Soon after that is mine. But every day was born a fool, one who thinks he can rule, one who says tomorrow's mine, one who wakes one day to find the prison doors open and shackles broken and chaos in the street. Everybody sings free, 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 free. Everybody thinks free, 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 free. Everybody thinks free, 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 free. They threw him in jail and kept him there, hoping his memory died. That the people forget how they won't stay, God forbid them their life. But every day was born a man who hates what we can't understand, who thinks the answer to kill, he thinks his action God's will, and he thinks he's free, 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 free. Let us all be free, 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 free. Let's all be free, free. Yeah.
Hello, this is a day of writers in prison for PEN International. I will do this presentation in Norwegian, but you can find it also on the PEN Internationals websites. Hvert år så publiserer PEN International en rapport om forfulgte skribenter. Rapporten er en global oversikt og omhandler altså dem som arbeider med å skrive. De fleste er journalister og forfattere. Forfølgelsen skjer ved fengslinger, vilkårlig rettergang og politiserte dommer. Verre blir det når også mange blir meldt savnet fordi de enten er bortført, eller fordi de er blitt drept, eller etter domsavsigelse er blitt henrettet. PEN Internationals rapport for 2022 viser langt fra alle utslag av sensur, men trakassering og forfølgelse av skribenter skjer i over 50 land, og omhandler 230 registrerte fengslinger. I 2022 ble 68 av dem fratatt livet. Det er en dyster oversikt med en foruroligende internasjonal trend i en rapport om skribenter som med livet som innsats har insistert på ytringsfrihetens rett til å holde regimer og maktmennesker ansvarlig. Hvert år så retter PEN International en særlig oppmerksomhet mot 4 fengslede skribenter, og jeg skal presentere disse for dere nå. Maria Cristina Garrido Rodriguez den kubanske poeten som ble dømt til 7 års fengsel etter falske anklager om blant annet ordensforstyrrelse, hensikt om å begå forbrytelse, forakt og motstand. Dommen kom etter at hun 12. juli året før deltok i fredelige protester mot uthuling av grunnleggende rettigheter i forbindelse med den kubanske regjeringens behandling av covid-krisa og en svekket økonomi i landet. Protestene samlet flere tusen i Kuba. Garrido ble utsatt for vold under arrestasjonen, og i 18 dager visste ingen hvor hun var. Hun nå fengslet i Guantánamo kvinnefengsel på strenge vilkår, med isolat, psykisk mishandling, lite mat og drikke og dårlige sanitærforhold. Familien hennes flere ganger blitt nektet til besøk og telefonsamtaler. Sammen med søsteren Angelica startet Garrido en 5 dagers sultestreik 20. september 2022. Hun en prisbelønt kubansk forfatter. I dag flere av hennes verk inndratt av kubanske myndigheter, og det tok et år før Garrido fikk lov til å skrive. Men i år publiserte det spanske forlaget Des Linde hennes bok «Fengslet stemme», dikt skrevet i fengselet. PEN krever at anklagene mot Garrido frafalles, at hun løslates umiddelbart og uten betingelser. Gu Sherab Gyatso, også kjent som Gusher, en velkjent tibetansk forfatter, lærer og intellektuell, som 26. oktober 2020 ble arrestert i Chengdu i Sichuan-provinsen og overført til Tibet, der han 1 år senere ble dømt til 10 års fengsel i lukket rett. Gusher har skrevet over 10 bøker, og flere essays som også oversatt til engelsk, tilgjengelig online. Tibetansk buddhisme, språk og kultur preger forfatterskapet hans, og han har rettet alvorlig kritikk mot myndighetenes ødeleggelse av tibetanske barns muligheter til undervisning på sitt eget morsmål. Gushers kritikk har ført til at han blitt fengslet 3 ganger tidligere. Både uavhengige menneskerettighetsgrupper og representanter for FN har uttrykt alvorlig bekymring for fengslingsforholdene Gusher blitt utsatt for. Han har en kronisk lungesykdom, og det stor usikkerhet om han får nødvendig medisinsk hjelp. De kinesiske myndighetenes fengsling av Gusher et klart brudd på ytringsfriheten, og PEN krever at han løslastes umiddelbart og uten betingelser. Irina Denovic menneskerettighetsaktivist, journalist og helsearbeider som har avslørt problemer i helsesystemet i det russisk okkuperte Krim. Hun har blitt trakassert av russiske myndigheter for sitt samarbeid med uavhengige medier om politikk og politisk motiverte rettssaker, og for sitt fagforeningsarbeid. 29. april 2022 ble hun bortført i Koktebel i russisk okkuperte Krim av uidentifiserte menn. Samme dag ransaket russiske soldater huset hennes, tok beslag i telefonen hennes og diverse utstyr. Advokaten til Denovic fant henne 11. mai i et varetektsfengsel i Simferopol. Hun blitt torturert og tvunget til å underskrive en tilståelse som hun ikke fikk lese. Hun ble tiltalt for, sitat, å ha kjøpt, oppbevart og transportert eksplosiver og eksplosivt utstyr, og for å være utenlandsk agent. 28. desember 2022 ble hun i Feodjosa byrett dømt til 7 års fengsel og en bot på 50 000 rubler, en dom som senere ble redusert med 1 måned. Hun soner dommen i fangeleir nummer 7 i Selenokomsk i Stavropol-regionen i Sør-Russland. Etter torturen har Doniolevich mistet hørselen på høyre øre, og i mars gikk hun til sultestreik mot den vedvarende mangelen på medisinsk hjelp. Mange ukrainske journalister, forfattere, menneskerettighetsaktivister i det okkuperte Krim er i dag fengslet på politisk grunnlag. PEN krever at de og Irina Danilovich løslates umiddelbart. Suleiman Razzouni er en kjent marokkansk journalist og tidligere sjefredaktør av avisa Akhbar al-Yom, som nå er nedlagt. På bakgrunn av hans kritikk av myndighetene ble han arrestert 22. mai 2020 og tiltalt for seksuelle overgrep. Razzouni benektet tiltalen og uttalte at den var politisk motivert. Han tilbragte nesten ett år i varetekt før saken mot ham kom opp i forhørsretten i Casablanca, til tross for at familien hans ba om løslatelse i påvente av rettssak. I varetekt fikk han begrenset hjelp, og i en rettssak som var preget av store mangler, ble han dømt til 5 års fengsel og en bot på tilsvarende $10,000, amerikanske dollar. Hverken hans advokat eller han selv fikk være til stede under domsansigelsen. Razzouni gikk til en 122 dagers sultestreik, og familien informerte PEN International om at streiken hadde svekket ham så alvorlig at det hadde påvirket hans evne til å kunne gå, uavhengig av hjelp. I fengselet er han også nektet å lese og skrive. FNs arbeidsgruppe mot vilkårlig fengsling konkluderte i juli 2022 at fengslingen av Razzouni var urettmessig, og i januar i år appellerte Europaparlamentet til marokkanske myndigheter om å beskytte ytrings- og pressefrihet og ivareta rettssikkerhet for alle fengslede journalister, inkludert Razzouni. PEN International følger også nøye den systematiske svertekampanjen fra marokkanske myndigheter som Razzouni's kone, forfatteren og journalisten Kholoud Mokhtari utsettes for. PEN mener at Razzouni ble urettmessig dømt på bakgrunn av det han skrev. Og i de kommende dagene så har PEN over hele verden aksjonsdager for disse 4 forfatterne. Takk for oppmerksomheten.
It's my honor to present to you the jury's justification for the Ossietzkyprisen 2023. Julian Assange has, both as a publisher and editor, been instrumental in revealing severe war crimes committed by the United States and its allies in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the unlawful imprisonment and abuse of detainees in Guantánamo. Julian Assange's publication of classified documents in 2010 contributed to important debates about the legitimacy of and lawfulness of US military actions, Norway's most important ally. The information provided a more accurate picture of the brutality and abuse of power, as well as gross violations of international law of war by the United States. The revelations formed the basis for news coverage worldwide and gave the public the opportunity to correct and prevent abuse of power and human rights violations, which is essential to critical journalism. Without the leaked documents published by Julian Assange, we would not have had this insight. The treatment that Julian Assange has been and is being subject to can amount to violations of the European Convention on Human Rights and the UN Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which prohibit any form of torture and inhuman treatment. Julian Assange faces the risk of extradition to the United States under the Espionage Act, which carries a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. There is only one court hearing and one final chance of appeal that now prevent extradition. The essence of investigative journalism is to systematically work to uncover truthful information, especially about reprehensible social conditions and abuse of power. According to US law legislation, it is the publication itself that can provide grounds for prosecution or conviction under the Espionage Act, which also implies possible prosecution of news media that have the news media that disseminate leaked material. An indictment under the espionage statute would have serious consequences for press and freedom of speech worldwide and would undermine journalists' legal protections, also here in Norway. If Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, the very core of press freedom is under attack and could mark a significant historical setback for independent critical journalism. There are also significant challenges to legal protection when an Australian citizen can be arrested in a European country and extradited for prosecution in the US for something published on internet. Citizens' right to information is a prerequisite for democracy. Without democracy based on informed citizens, abuse of power and violations of the law cannot be corrected and changed. Julian Assange has defended the core of democracy. Like several predecessors, Julian Assange has made public essential documents in this sensitive area, a role that is often criticized but will be recognized as highly significant when history is to be written. So, with this empty chair, Stella, would you please come forward?
Down a bit. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Norsk Pen on Julian's behalf for this award. I spoke to him earlier today, and he said he wanted to share that he is very thankful, not only to Norwegian Pen, but to the Norwegian people who have been very supportive of him. And although the Norwegian government has not yet come around, surely they must, given such a energetic and supportive population. I'd also personally like to thank Norwegian Pen, and I think Pen is a very interesting organization. It has a clearly defined goal, which I think is a great advantage in the kind of landscape of non-governmental organizations. And the goal is to free them, to free the imprisoned writers, to free them all. We suffer collectively from the intellectual poverty of their imprisonment. Think how much we're missing out on of their contributions that they would be able to make if they were free. And from Julian's prison cell in Belmarsh prison, which is the harshest prison in the United Kingdom, he's in a tiny cell of 2 by 3 meters, and he himself says that he has survived not in a small part thanks to reading, thanks to his books. Books of all sorts, to begin with a mathematics book, because Julian studied mathematics at university, and he found that this book on advanced mathematics would center his mind so that he was able to focus on something real and predictable. And this was at the height of his isolation inside the so-called healthcare wing in Belmarsh prison, where he had been put on suicide watch. And afterwards, he was moved into the general population part of Belmarsh prison, and his single cell of 2 by 3 meters. And eventually, he's entered into a kind of dispute with the prison about the amount of books he has, because one of the things that one can do, anyone can do, actually, practically the only present that one can give Julian is a book. You can send books to him. So lots of people have sent him books. And so he has lots of books in his cell. And at one point, the prison said, "You have too many books." And so then there was a discussion about what is the regulation on books, how is it counted? And they said, you can only have 25. And he has, I probably shouldn't say how many, but many more than that. And so he then gave up his bed, because the regulation on books is volume, the volume it takes up of the prison cell. So he decided to give up his bed, so he's on a yoga mat, he sleeps on a yoga mat, because he'd rather part with his bed than part with his books. And he says the books are his friends. So I think we all feel that way when reading great authors. And anyway, that's all of my improvised speech. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Mohamedou Walsalahi. I come from Mauritania in North Africa. I currently work as a writer in residence at night in the Bali in the Netherlands. My journey has been shaped by adversity. Following the tragic events of 9/11, I became a victim of multinational operation involving the US, Canada, Jordan, Cyprus, and my homeland. This operation led to my abduction, transporting me from Mauritania to Jordan, to Bagram, and ultimately to Guantánamo Bay, where I endured a harrowing 15-year imprisonment. My experiences during this time I recounted in my book, Guantánamo Diary, which later was adapted in the film, The Mauritanian. The day I bid farewell to my mother as she faded into the distance in the rearview mirror of the departing car remains etched in my memory. I was thrust into a world of silence and darkness, a place designed by the very nation that claims to champion freedom. I remained there an innocent man until my release in October of 2016. It was during those dark years that I learned of Julian Assange and his fearless effort to unveil some of the dark truths behind the torture, war, and mayhem perpetuated in the name of democracy post 9/11. I learned of these unbelievably through TV coverage of WikiLeaks exposure of US atrocities in Iraq, and especially its release of the collateral murder video. As I watched this video on television in my Guantánamo cell, I couldn't help but struck by the casualness of the soldiers discussing the impending bloodshed they were about to commit. The phrase, light them up, sounded chillingly indifferent, reducing living beings into mere characters in a video game. My story reflects the global reality post 9/11, the pervasive reach of the United States, capable of kidnapping and harming anyone, anywhere. You can imagine how deeply Assange's courageous revelations resonated deeply with me. Regrettably, Assange paid a heavy price for his bravery, as he was abandoned by the so-called free world, including and most importantly, by his own country. This conspiracy seeks to silence those who dare to expose crimes against innocent human beings. I wish for accountability to be directed toward those responsible for kidnapping and torturing detainees, those who committed war crimes, rather than targeting those who reveal the truth. In time of war, as Hiram Johnson astutely observed, the first casualty is truth. And the German saying holds true, where the military marches in, lies follow. Wo das Militär einmarschiert, folgt die Lüge. The lies are sacred, and woe to those who dare expose them. Showing that emperor has no clothes proved to be a serious crime. Light them all up. Come on, fire. Keep shoot, keep shoot, keep shoot, keep shoot. Hotel Bushmaster, 2 seconds. Bushmaster, 2 seconds. We need to move. Time now. All right. We just engaged all 8 individuals. Yeah. We see 2 birds. And we'll still fire. Roger. I got him. 2 seconds. This is 2 seconds. We're mobile. Oops. I'm sorry. What was going on? God damn it, Kyle. All right. Ha ha ha. I hear him. Oh, you clear. You clear, said the soldier as he lit up those innocent people. But Julian Assange is not clear, not by a long shot, for exposing the crimes that were committed. Dear Stella, although I never had the pleasure of meeting your husband, Julian, it seems as if I had. As we celebrate the PEN Norway Ossietzky Award, I hope that this prestigious honor, combined with the remarkable campaign's unwavering support and global solidarity, will secure the release of Julian and reunite him with his family and his kids. I hate when Nancy wrote to me in prison, do not despair. But I'm repeating the same to you. Do not despair. Thank you.
Drinking Norwegians. It's good to know. I'll have it emphasized in this way. Now, when did you see Julian last? When did you see Julian last, Stella?
Well, I actually saw him yesterday, yesterday afternoon, so not so long ago. And I see him about once or twice a week. And he... Yep. Sure. He was this week. He has a typewriter, which is something that's new.
A typewriter.
Yeah. He's not allowed access to the internet. He has a laptop, but there's no writing software on it, which is a terrible punishment for someone. Who writes so much, like Julian does, of course. So he had been asking for a typewriter for some time, I mean, for years actually. But now
so
he
the
has...
old click-to-click,
yes,
old-fashioned typewriter we left 20 or 25 years ago.
That's right, old-fashioned typewriter, and this has given him a lot of... Well, it's been a nice change to his prison environment, his cell environment.
But this is obviously a good sign. I mean, I too probably would be extremely pleased with that typewriter, but how is he otherwise?
Well, every day is a struggle. He's suffering in there, of course. He is extremely isolated. He has to eat alone in his cell. His contact with the outside world is extremely limited. He can call me and a few other people. He can call his lawyers. Everything's recorded, of course. Our conversations are limited to 10 minutes at a time. And then it cuts off, and then we have to wait until he can call me back. And I'm not able to call him. But we speak during the day unless there's some technical problem or he runs out of credit, because it's incredible. The prison system is it's quite a business for the phone service, and you know, he has to pay, I have to pay, and sometimes there's a limit to how much you can charge up. So sometimes he runs out. His physical health is not good. Obviously, deteriorating over time, steadily deteriorating. He gets no more than an hour outside of, well, in the open air, in a concrete yard, and very, very little interaction with other people. Usually about 21, 22, sometimes 23 hours a day in his cell. He can, except the days when he has visits, in which case he's out of cell for maybe a couple of hours or a bit more, but part of that will be in holding cells as he's taken to another part of the prison.
And I expect this is the time where I say that Stella is not only Mrs. Assange. Can you say that, Mrs. Assange? She's not only married to Julian, but she's of course a human rights advocate, and you hold degrees from SOAS, School of Asian and African Oriental Studies at the University of London, where I actually taught some classes many years ago, and a master from Oxford and from Complutense in Madrid. And then this has turned you into a human rights advocate, and that is how you started to work on, well, as a human rights advocate for Julian. And then since then, you have formed a family to the extent that has been possible with his terrible conditions, and you have 2 boys together.
Yeah, that's right. We have our youngest is going to turn 5 in a couple of months, and our eldest is 6.5. So he was born in 2017, and year and a half of his life, he would visit Julian inside the embassy under, extreme surveillance, and even our eldest, who was just a baby, was the target of surveillance operations. We found out after Julian was arrested that the security company working inside the embassy had instructions, not from Ecuador, but from United States agencies to collect the nappy of our 6-month-old in order to analyze the DNA. So even our children have been, the targets of these abuses.
There are some photos where you see Julian and the little boy being incredibly happy. So, in spite of all of this, you managed that too. Yeah,
and I think it's important to to stay human and nurture humanity, you know, in whatever way you can. And obviously, I think it's been really important for, you know, for both of us to be able to see each other during this time, even though it's been very limited. When we go, I take the children to see Julian on weekends in the prison. It's only about an hour and a half that we get to spend together, but it's, you know, it's very it keeps us, you know, united and is a highlight of our week to see each other, even under these insane circumstances.
So now to you as a human rights advocate and not the mother and wife, but how can these extreme security restrictions be justified in Julian's case?
Well, they're not. There's just you see, when it comes to Julian, it seems that the exception is the norm, and the only, if you enter this with the framework that this is how the legal system normally behaves, then you don't understand anything. But when you understand that this is a political case and that basically norms are stretched, distorted, and undermined in the process in order to keep him imprisoned, that's because there are other interests other than justice that are in operation. And so that's why we have a legal process that is behaving unpredictably, extremely harshly. You know, Julian is not convicted of any crime, and yet he's in the harshest prison in the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom is a country that where you only serve about 50% of your custodial sentence, which means that people who have been convicted to 9 years of prison have already been to prison and served their sentence and been released in the time that Julian has been spent inside Belmarsh prison 4.5 years. So that's just to, you know, you can dress things up in process and all sorts of administrative justifications, but you have to look at the situation in terms of the real impact, the reality of it, and you have a man who has not been convicted of anything, and when you look at the accusations, these are completely political accusations and politically motivated accusations, who is basically indefinitely detained in extremely, well, the harshest conditions possible.
So in 2015, this UN working group on arbitrary detention, we heard reference made to it here in the case concerning the Moroccan detainee, held that Julian was subjected to arbitrary detention in violation of international law. And this is when he was still in the embassy where he had sought asylum. How has the international reaction been since that ruling by this working group of the United Nations?
Well, I think that the working group's determination was really a turning point, because the working group had been considering the information that it had received. It was, it was an adversarial process. He got the application from Julian, and then the response by Sweden and the UK defending their position, and then the working group taking into account all the information that had been presented, ruled that Julian was arbitrarily detained, and the UK reacted very badly and then tried to undermine the credibility of the working group and said some pretty outrageous things, and this is incredibly short-sighted, of course, because they rely on the working group regularly when it concerns
Iran, Russia,
exactly.
Whichever country you do not like, you like to use the UN as a witness to the human rights violations taking place there in those countries you don't like.
Precisely, and you know, talking about the independence and the expertise, which is correct. So there was a backlash, and I think it was a difficult but incredibly important decision by the working group, which of course has been vindicated subsequently, partly because there have been freedom of information disclosures during this time. There's an Italian investigative journalist who has written a book called WikiLeaks and Its Enemies. It's translated into English and German and French. And she based this book basically on reconstructing all this information that she managed to obtain through disclosure, through making applications. And she didn't obtain everything. And through these applications, she also learned that the United Kingdom and Sweden had destroyed a lot of the official document, the correspondence. But a great deal of information is known, and it completely vindicates the working group's conclusions that behind the scenes, these two countries were secretly colluding to keep Julian from being able to defend himself, ensuring that he remained detained, ensuring that he was in a kind of legal limbo where he wasn't charged of anything, so he couldn't have access to any exculpatory evidence, and that the UK was saying, no, you don't question him. He should be remain in the embassy basically without being questioned, because if you question him, then it might fall apart, basically. So that was the first decision in, I think, it was made public in 2016.
Yes.
And then there was, since then there has been the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, UN Special Rapporteur on Privacy, and a number of others who have also pronounced themselves, especially in the lead up to his arrest, because it was clear that his political asylum was basically about to be revoked for political reasons. And I actually met with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the previous one, Bachelet, and she also put out a statement saying that she was very concerned.
They've been very clear. So at the international level, this has been clarified in a way which can't really be challenged. I must say that I was pleased what you said about the working group, because I was chairing the working group in the period leading up to this ruling. So I followed the case very, very closely, also in a formal sense from then on. And then afterwards, all these other UN authorities, as you say, have been extremely clear about the violations of international law, freedom of expression, information, arbitrary detention, the conditions constituting of his detention before the high security detention, and now constituting torture. And torture, isn't that among the worst things a country can be accused of, or actually being condemned for by a United Nations body? What is worse? That must be genocide, huh?
Well, it's one of these absolute prohibitions. You cannot torture an individual. You have to treat them with dignity and humanity, and but it is cruel and inhuman treatment, clearly, that has been meted on Julian. And it's quite telling that when the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Meltzer, who subsequently wrote a book about Julian's case, which I highly recommend, that when he was writing his report and asking the UK for its feedback on his findings, that they basically didn't engage. And this is you don't engage when you have no arguments to bring. And of course, I mean, any independent observer can see that Julian's treatment is cruel, and it's sort of a parade of cruelty. It's there's this a public-facing, making an example of him aspect to it that is very, very deliberate. It's not just that. I don't think it doesn't just serve the purpose of silencing him, which obviously that is one purpose, to try to remove him from public life, to remove his voice from public debate, and to silence him, and ultimately to try to shut down WikiLeaks. Right? That's part of it, but it's also to make an example of him and to intimidate, bully, and chill the press, and to parade him around as if if anyone else gets ideas like this to expose powerful interests, then this is what happens to you, and surely you're not going to risk it. So that's that's part of it. It's they're putting his head on a pike. That's a deliberate strategy.
So to you and to the others, we have to ask about what happens in the UK process. Where do we stand there? And then we have to ask, well, if the UK process fails, he is extradited, or there's a legal decision to extradite, then what about the European Human Rights Court? And what else is happening at the US side? And then, what's happening in the UK?
Well, in the UK, you see, this process has been going for 4.5 years, and the short story is that Julian has not been permitted to appeal the decision to extradite him. So there's 3 levels of the court. There's the magistrates' court, there's a high court, and there's a Supreme Court. And he has put in an appeal to the High Court, and that request for an appeal, because it's not automatic, that's been rejected. So the High Court has said, we're not even going to hear your arguments, which is extraordinary. When you think that this is the defining case on press freedom globally. You couldn't have a more clear-cut case where you have publication evidencing the reality of war crimes and human rights abuse and torture and so on. You have all the press freedom organizations saying this case is an attack on journalism itself. This is extremely dangerous. This biggest attack on journalism globally speaking. He's a foreign citizen in a foreign country publishing true information that's damning and indicting of the country that's trying to extradite him. so it couldn't be clearer. And you have all the human rights organizations, Amnesty International and so on, saying this is a political persecution, it's politically motivated and so on. And yet the High Court says, we're not even going to hear your arguments. So that's where the stage is at. And there is a final recourse for him to be able to ask for a review of this decision. The decision not to hear his case was taken by a single judge behind closed doors on the papers. The review will be a public hearing before 2 judges, and they could reverse the decision, but obviously it's an uphill battle now because as it stands, there's a High Court ruling that he should be extradited and no appeal will be heard. It could be reversed, but if it's not reversed, that's the end of the line in the United Kingdom. And then there is an avenue, of course, to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights. The UK's approach to the European Court of Human Rights.
Skeptical at best, huh?
Skeptical, and of course the UK is not politically, I wouldn't describe it as a very politically stable place. Stability in the sense that, well, yes, there has been a conservative government for 13 years or so, but they've had lots of prime ministers. Just yesterday there was a cabinet reshuffle. The Home Secretary was thrown out. They lost an important case at the Supreme Court to do with the European Court of Human Rights on the Rwanda asylum seekers.
Basically shipping asylum seekers to Rwanda while they decide on whether they are going to be granted refugee status or not.
Yes, that's right. And but the European Court of Human Rights for the right, like the conservatives of the UK, it's kind of the new Brexit frontier. It's the new, it's a vote winner. That the public likes that argument because it's the outside, imposing these European judges. It's very strange. So the European Court of Human Rights is definitely an avenue that Julian will seek to appeal to, but again, the UK's behavior is unpredictable, and
what you're actually looking for is a court which can hear his complaint against being extradited to the US, and we're getting to the end of our talk, but what is happening in the US? What can he expect in the US? And are there any political developments or legal developments in the US which gives any hope?
Well, whereas what I've been describing is a quite a dire and precarious legal situation where the case is coming to a head, and he may be literally could be extradited within a matter of months, if not weeks, if it goes in a worst case scenario. Politically, the situation has improved over time, and that's in large part thanks to huge global citizenship mobilization around the world. I was just in Naples last week, where Julian has been given honorary citizenship. Rome has also granted Julian honorary citizenship, and a number of other Italian cities. In Australia, Julian has enormous support. Over between 85 and 90% of the Australian population want Julian to be released and come home. The Australian government has said he should be released. And in the United States, just this week, there has been a publicized letter from members of Congress, both senators and representatives in the lower house, who have signed on to this letter asking Biden to drop the case. And this is not just some fringe figures. This is it was led by two kind of very centrist figures, including the Democrat ranking member of the House Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, who's very much at the center of the Democratic Party. So this is a major shift, and I think it kind of reinforces the fact that this case has always been extremely controversial within the United States. It is seen as an attack on the First Amendment, on the press, setting a precedent that can be used against the rest of the press. It's an unpopular case, and that's why I think that the political mobilization, the popular mobilization, really can set him free.
So what we have to do here, then, I expect, is to be tying a Norwegian part in this global mobilization. And today is one thing we could do as the Norwegian Pen Club. And then, of course, we're very happy to hear about Julian and the books. We are the Pen Club after all. And then, so are we then supposed to send him books then, you think? Google Belmarsh prison and send him a good translation of into English of a Norwegian book or something else? Will that be welcome? He'll fill up another bed in his cell?
Well, I mean, you can try. If you Google "write to Julian Assange," you get the instructions of how to do that. But I mean, the prison keeps on saying he's over quota, so it's an ongoing struggle. But there's a lot that can be done. Obviously, the prize today is incredibly important, keeping Julian at the forefront of the debate, because his case is defining of our generation, of the public's right to know, whether the West is now a place of imprisoning dissidents and journalists, or whether it's not. That's defined with this case, and at the moment, the West is failing very badly. There has to be a correction, of course, because you can't keep Julian imprisoned and continue and pretend like everything will continue as before. You need to corrupt the system in order to keep him imprisoned, and so that's the real battle. There are many ways to support there's a website called Don't Extradite Assange. Free Assange Emergency Toolkit.com has specific actions. In terms of citizen mobilizations, I believe that there are similar actions that can be taken in Norway of granting honorary citizenship at kind of a municipal level. That's something perhaps that some people might be interested in this room. And obviously those in a position to do so, if they wish to contribute financially to the legal or campaign efforts, then that's of course welcome. But mainly to stay informed, engaged in this case, to talk about Julian's case, to read the books. That's incredibly important as well.
Thank you. Stella is not only a stellar human rights advocate, but a tireless one. And thank you for coming here and giving us this focus in what is an ongoing campaign.
Thank you.
I would love to close this ceremony with a solidarity song to Gaza and Palestine. And this song was made like in 1980-something during the Israeli invasion to Lebanon. شمس طلي طلي شاوري عبيتي دلي يا شمس طلي طلي شاوري عبيتي دلي كيال الكيل ختياري مات ظلي عم يحرز ظلي عادل عخي ميلي خي ما يحمل شيلي ما خف الشيل ثاني المرات ناصر رصاصي سيلي يا شمسي طلي طلي شاوري عبيتي دلي يا شمسي طلي طلي شاوري عبيتي دلي عيني في الفيلم ضلة كنا ندري ما نضلها عيني في الفيلم ضلة كنا ندري ما نضلها يا ويل الويل نرمي الجمرة عدي اللي استشهد كلها يا شمسي طلي طلي شاوري عبيتي دلي هلا 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 هلا. Tusen takk.
In events like this, seminars, meetings, we often, when we talk about human rights abuses, about torture, imprisonment, there is one word always coming up in the end, and that is hope. But that word wasn't mentioned once, I believe, during this. And why is that? Well, one way of looking at it is of course, well, there is limited amounts of hope. But another way reminded me of a conversation I had with a Turkish author and writer, Ece Temelkuran, living in exile in London, saying hope is a word which is, it's used too many times. It's an emotional crutch. We have to replace hope with faith. And she was not talking about religious faith, but faith in that we can make a difference. A faith in civil society and people wanting to change things. And I think this is why we're not talking too much about hope today, because there is a willingness to change. There is a willingness to do things. And I think the word here, don't stop fighting for Julian until he is free. That is something we should take along with us for Julian, but also for many imprisoned writers, musicians, artists around the world on this day, the 15th of November. So I would just like to thank everyone for coming. If you want to contribute and you feel that PEN Norway is the tool you want to use to contribute, of course, we are more than happy to welcome you as a volunteer, as a financial supporter, or in any other way. So please just contact us. Thank you, Stella, for coming. Thank you, Tore Brun, for playing. Thank you, Mats, Dag, Ann-Mariette, and thank you to my lovely colleagues who's been organizing all of this. And again, thank you for coming.